This is Scott Becker with the Becker Private Equity and Business Podcast. We come to you daily with short business episodes, short private equity episodes, interviews with business and private equity leaders, as well as body of life episodes. Today's discussion is on delegation, when to delegate. So one of the great questions that leaders have is, when do they start to delegate and how do they start to delegate and so forth? And so I'll give you 3 or 4 different thoughts on this. One is that when someone can do something better than you, it's time to delegate. And I'll give you an example. We just were recording our own audiobook called The Entrepreneur's Edge. I won't even give a pitch for the book right now, but we recorded the audiobook. And then the person who's in charge of mastering the files and doing it, for Amazon and Audible and all those others says, this is not good. It's okay. It's not great. You ought to have a professional narrator do it. And so that's one example. When somebody else could do it just clearly better than you could do it, at this point in time, you delegate. The second reason you delegate is when you need to take stuff off of your plate to do the things that are more important. So we're a huge believer in building companies that you do everything you can around your core competencies, whatever's absolutely core to the business, and you outsource everything else. So in building a company, building a software company, it might be commercialization efforts and entrepreneurial efforts, or engineering efforts that are done internally, and everything else is outsourced. And we believe that to its core, that you really try and focus on what you could do great, and then you outsource other things. The third concept is we try to delegate as much administrative tasks as humanly possible, so to allow myself to focus on the more important things. And just, and sometimes I'll get it right, sometimes I'll get it wrong. There's a great concept in one of the books that I've read, Buy Back Your Time, where the author talks about, look, if you're delegating to, does it 80% as well as you do, or 70% as well, whatever the number is, and it frees you up to do the important things you need to do, then by all means, you ought to delegate it. You ought to delegate to that person, even if it's imperfect. That's in line with another management thought we have. We always think that if somebody's performing at an A- level, a B+ level, or an A level, you don't nitpick and don't correct. You praise the heck out of the 90% they're doing great, and you sort of live with that. And maybe once in a while you talk about where they can improve other things, but you really try and live with those things if somebody's performing that well on your team or with your team in what you're doing. In terms of delegation, the fourth thought is it's easier to delegate when you have time. There are 2 thoughts here. It's easier to delegate to highly competent people. So the more that you build and resource a network of highly competent people to delegate to and work with, the much easier it is to delegate to them. The other concept on delegation is when you're going to start delegating or seriously outsourcing, one of the things that you have to learn is that to be good at it, you have to take some time to learn to pick outsourcing partners, to pick who you're delegating to know what you're delegating, to have clarity of what you're trying to delegate. I know early on in one of my publishing businesses, we were delegating some stuff to India at the time, and it could have gone fantastically well, but I didn't have the bandwidth to manage it well. It's very similar when I think about this. Companies either do things or they don't do this. If you're going to outsource, you have to be prepared to manage outsourcing, to manage delegation, to understand what it is. It should still allow you to leverage your time and leverage your company's time well and to really focus on core competencies, but it does take time to manage and delegate. One of the other things that comes to mind when we talk about this subject is joint ventures. People constantly come to us with joint venture ideas, and if you're not in the business of doing joint ventures and managing joint ventures, you will find that they can be very, very challenging, or if you're fully in them, far better. It's very similar. When you used to work with hospitals doing joint ventures or doing acquisitions, if they've done 10 of them, they're a pleasure to work with because they really understood what they were trying to do. If they're always doing things one-off and not developing core competencies, very, very challenging. So people talk all the time about alignments and joint ventures, but those themselves, like delegation, take a lot of time to manage it and work with. And the more that you've done a number of them, the better off you are at them. And I think it's a very important skill set to sort of learn. Those are some of the thoughts about delegation and management. The times you don't delegate or manage, or where I hate this, and I saw it on the golf course recently, if you're going to delegate and manage and outsource things, you want to do so in a polite, professional, very, very, good way. I saw something the other day, and again, some people take this as how it should be done. I take it as absolutely abominable behavior. Just sort of throws his golf ball to the caddy to clean the golf ball. He sort of rolls it to him, doesn't say, "Hey, can you grab this? Thank you so much," whatever. But it's a lesson. It's like that story of everything you learned in kindergarten. Any kind of delegation, you have to do with positivity and professionalism. And it's not just a transaction, it's a relationship. And you got to view almost everything like that. And delegation is no different. I mean, it's another thought in delegation. Sometimes it goes great, sometimes it does go great. And you got to figure out whether you're going to invest in that outsourcing partner to get better and better at delegating with that partner. And then what happens is people talk about trying to introduce new resources, new companies, new this, new that. And I think the opposite is when you find great outsourcing partners who are going to be able to delegate, you really try and embrace those and work with them regularly. We talk about this all the time. We have a producer on the podcast that I just love working with. I don't have any desire to find other resources. I love working with that producer. We try and do it all the time. So when I think about this on delegating, yeah, you can't delegate too haphazardly. You got to be willing to manage that delegation to know what's going on. But ultimately, you find great partners, great people to delegate with. It allows companies to grow. It allows individuals to grow, entrepreneurs to grow, and so much more. So we're the biggest fan, and it's a working process to learn how to do it. But it's critical to growing anything serious in business or in life. Thank you for listening to the Becker Private Equity and Business Podcast. Always feel free to suggest ideas, 773-766-5322. Thank you so much for listening today.